All right. I hope everybody's doing good. Today we're going to talk about the presidency. We're not going to get into the broader executive branch. The executive constitutionally kind of covers the president as well as the president's cabinet. Um, and we're going to stick pretty much just to the president today. The bureaucracy has kind of taken on a life of its own. So over time, people started kind of talking about the bureaucracy as a separate entity, even though it's technically part of the broader executive branch. Okay. So let's get into the president. What does it take to be the president? Well, not much. Whoa. No, not much. The only requirements of the president are that you're a natural born citizen, that you're 35 years old, and that that you've been a resident of the United States for the previous 14 years, right? So those aren't too onerous of requirements. There's no sort of legal requirement that you become a lawyer or a judge or member of Congress or really anything, right? You can be a real estate guy with a TV show, right? There's no requirements really outside of these basic requirements here, and the fact that you get elected through our electoral system, which is something kind of interesting and strange in and of itself. We're not going to talk about that today. We're going to kind of focus just kind of singularly on the president. Okay, so let's look at some of the powers of the president because these are really important. And I'll talk about, the president's powers have increased over time. All right, so what powers does the president have formally? Things that are formally mentioned in the Constitution. Well, the president has the power to veto legislation, to basically say, no, not going to sign this, or I'm going to explicitly veto it and ensure that it does not become a law, right? And we'll talk about how that can be overridden, but that is a formal legislative power of the president. The president has the power to be the commander in chief and to make treaties. Okay, so these are foreign powers, right? Powers, generally speaking, commander in chief, that's going to be the leader of the military, and the military usually does its job in other countries, foreign theaters of war, right? So and treaties as well, right? We make treaties with other countries. Now we can talk about the extent to which an executive order is a formal or informal power of the president. It's implied. It's implied from the president's executive power, so that might mean that it's more of an informal power. But with that said, executive orders carry the weight of law. Usually, they try to base it in some sort of legislative, law, something that Congress wrote that would give the president that power. Okay. Informal powers. So the pocket veto. The pocket veto is where the president takes a law, sets it aside. Right? And we have this weird thing where if it's the end of a congressional session within 10 days, the president can just kind of set a law aside and they don't have to veto it. Right? If that 10 days, if the session ends within that 10 days, then that law just kind of disappears because it didn't get signed into law by the president. However, if the president tries to pocket veto, which it doesn't really make sense that the president would try to do this, and there are more than 10 days left in the session, then after those 10 days, that law automatically becomes law without the president having to sign it, right? So it's only in a really narrow circumstance that the president can pocket veto. Executive agreements. Executive agreements are like little treaties. They're like mini treaties. They don't carry the weight of treaties because treaties become kind of international law between two countries, and they're strong laws. Executive agreements can dissipate between presidents. A president can unilaterally get rid of an executive agreement, so they don't have to actually stick around, and they're not particularly strong compared to a treaty. Another informal power, and some argue that this is the strongest power that the president has, is the power of persuasion. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, like under what circumstances is a president more likely to persuade members of Congress to write laws that the president supports. And lastly, informal power is the signing statement. And the signing statement is where the president basically says, hey, Congress, I hear what you're saying, but I interpret what you're saying completely differently than what you may have intended. Right, so a signing statement is kind of interesting, and it falls along this executive agreement, executive order, as something that maybe wasn't intended, right, for the president to do, and maybe is an expansion of presidential power. Right, George W. Bush, has a pretty famous signing statement where he basically told Congress, yeah, I hear what you're saying about the collection of data of American citizens, but as the executive, I disagree. So I'm going to continue to collect information, to spy, for lack of a better term, to spy on Americans in the name of protecting us from terrorism. Now, you can agree or disagree with that, whether or not that is legitimate or not, but that's what he said. So that was a signing statement, right? You can see how it kind of runs contrary. And this is problematic because, the president is supposed to faithfully execute the laws, right? And those are laws that are written not by the president, but written by Congress, right? So some of the stuff that the president does, some of the expansion of presidential power actually seems to be somewhat unconstitutional, right? All right, so what are some of the checks that we have on the president? Well, advice and consent is huge, and this applies to the confirmation process, okay? The Senate must give their advice, not just their advice, but also their consent to Supreme Court justices that the president nominates, right? Now, you can see how this could become an issue. Like currently, we have a Republican Senate and a Republican president. Right? So we're probably not going to see a whole lot of advice and consent issues or confirmation issues. We actually have seen some confirmation issues. But you're less likely to see it if the president and the Senate are from the same party. Now, if the president was a Republican and the Senate was controlled by Democrats, then you're really likely to see issues and a lot of pushback. Okay. Ruth Bader Ginsburg just passed away, right? President Trump is going to nominate a new Supreme Court justice, and it'll be up to the Senate to give consent. Well, the Senate is controlled 53-47 by Republicans currently. So are the Republicans likely to push that through? Well, I mean, there's a couple that are kind of stragglers, but basically all that the Senate now, because the cloture rules have changed, all the Senate really needs now is 51 votes, right? And they don't even really need 51 votes. They only need 50 votes because who breaks ties? Well, it's the vice president. And the vice president is clearly a Republican and clearly going to vote in favor of the president as well, right? So that's kind of how this system, but again, if it was controlled by Democrats, if the Senate was controlled by Democrats, then this process would be quite a bit more difficult, okay? All right, treaties. Treaties must be confirmed by 2/3 of the Senate. It's actually kind of difficult to get a treaty passed, and we don't do a lot of treaties. The U.S. never wants to make its interest beholden to another country. Right? We like to act unilaterally because we consider ourselves a kind of global hegemon, which basically means that we're powerful, and if not the most powerful. And we're seeing things maybe change a little bit. But since about World War II, we have been the most powerful country in the world. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it means that as the most powerful country in the world, why would you make yourself beholden to other people, right? You try to do what you want, right? So we don't sign a lot of treaties, and that's just kind of like a realpolitik thing. Now you might disagree and say, "Well, I don't think that we should." I think that we should be more. I think we should make deals with other countries, be more diplomatic. And you know what? You're not going to get any disagreement out of me, but it's just a matter of fact, right? It's just a matter of fact that that's how we kind of behave. Okay. Now, moving on, talk quickly about the president's cabinet and staff. So the president's cabinet and staff can act as a bit of a check on the president as well, to the extent that they might not be particularly good at interacting with the Senate. Okay. And what I mean by that is basically if you have, like President Trump, a kind of ever-changing cast of characters in your House, in your White House staff and in your cabinet, one, they might not be that experienced in government, and two, because they're coming in and new all the time, that makes it difficult to deal with people because you haven't developed relationships. Okay.